name's Laura Graneman. I have the honor and privilege of leading the Rocket Community Fund and the Gilbert Family Foundation. And I'm so excited to welcome you here to our annual conversation around women in leadership. I think there could not be a more important topic for us to be tackling this year when it seems like there are so many forces working against not only women in leadership, but just leadership. So this is a really exciting conversation for all of us, and I'm really grateful that you all are here. I'm excited to introduce our panel. First and foremost is Senator Sarah Anthony. That's what I thought. Senator Anthony is an amazing trailblazer. She has had a series of firsts, including being the first Black woman head of appropriations. And fun fact, I used to be her intern. So when we talk about women in leadership, this right here is a great example. Second is Miss Joy Harris. Joy has spent 30 plus years? 35 years with DTE and has served in almost every area of the organization, from what I can tell. Yeah. Is that right?
Many.
And then last but not least is Portia Roberson. Every year at this panel, we aim to have a person who represents the political community, a person who represents the corporate or business community, and a person who represents the nonprofit community. But I have to say, they all kind of exist. I could just have this panel with Portia because she represents so many different backgrounds, and she's just an incredible woman, but currently is the CEO of Focus Hope. So thank you all so much for being here. And I would love to start. We, every year at this panel, really aim to break out of our roles and talk more about our personal histories and sort of how we can collectively as a community think about supporting women in leadership. So I would love to hear from you all first. Who was the first woman that really showed you that you could do, that you could thrive and succeed in the role that you have today? And what did she do to support you?
Yeah. Thank you again for having me. So I have a dual answer because I can't just give a straight answer. In high school, I interned in the Capitol with Mary Waters. And it was the first time that I got a peek at what a strong woman in the legislature could actually look like. Now, it was an internship, so I was like licking envelopes and answering angry phone calls, so there was nothing profound about it. But then after college, I had a job with Representative Joan Bauer. And she was the chair of the Higher Education Appropriations Committee, and she was always put together. And I loved that she was a strong leader, but she wasn't a bull in a china shop. And she taught me that women can lead boldly and strongly, but not try to cosplay as like the bro in the room. And that showed me that I could just be myself, that I didn't have to try to pretend to be the strongest, toughest. I could lead with femininity, I could lead with quiet strength, and I could kind of do me and not try to do what traditional politicians do in the role that is traditionally a male-dominated profession. So I would say my first full-time boss, Joan Bauer.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That.
Wow. That was great. First, let me just thank all of Team DTE. Where are you? Thank you for being here, Team DTE. I have had many examples, but I always refer back to the strongest leader that I know of, that I modeled, was my mother. And that's where it starts for me, is at home. And she was and is the matriarch of our family. And I learned so many lessons about how to deal with adversity, how to have strength. Sometimes that strength has to be more than quiet. It has to be loud and vocal, but it also has to be enduring. And that was first and foremost where I learned about what it meant to be a strong woman leader. And then secondly, I've had the wonderful experience of watching, some of you may know her, Joyce Hayes-Giles. She worked for DTE for many years, over 40 years. And she was a pillar in the community, but she also did an outstanding job of ensuring that DTE fulfilled its promise, fulfilled its promise to its customers, fulfilled its promise to the communities. But she was a dynamo inside of our four walls, and she was not afraid to call out when she saw things that perhaps we should be doing differently, both on behalf of our customers and also just on behalf of the community at large. And so she was very much a supporter along the course of my career, still is to this very day. I stand on her shoulders. She was a senior vice president of community customer. She was in customer, she was in public affairs. She has every degree that you can imagine. I don't know where she found the time to do it and still, have a 40-year career with us, but she was just an outstanding leader. And I still call upon her to this very day to get her counsel on many things. And I hope Joyce is out there watching because we owe her a debt of gratitude. I do in particular.
I love that. I think I'm much like Joy. My first role model was my mother. I will say that my mother was born in a small town in Mississippi. And by the time she was 17, both of her parents were deceased. And she managed to still graduate from college, get a master's in social work, move to a city that she was somewhat unfamiliar with, and really show me what it meant to lead, even when things were less than or when people perceived her as having less than. And so I think that was sort of the first thing that clicked for me, that sometimes you have to push through that adversity and really continue to grow and continue to chart your own path. And so that was first. For those of us who are in the room, like Joy and I, who are CAS technicians, shout out to CAS. I see Tiffany over there. I didn't see her raise her hand. CAS in the house. We had a principal when I was there, Jeanette Wheatley. And Jeanette was sort of a quiet strength. It was much like Sarah said, she wasn't a bully, but she let you know that she was in charge, right? And she was, I think I've thought a lot about the women that I've seen who very much didn't cosplay, but were very intentional on making sure that when they were in spaces, that even as teachers and as educators, is not necessarily a space where men still don't dominate in some ways, that they really still figured out a way to let you know that they were in charge. And it wasn't about being mean or nasty or pushing too hard. It was just sort of that quiet strength. And so I'm not typically like that, but I'm trying to incorporate more of that into who I am.
That's awesome. Well, when we first started this panel series, it kind of felt to me like everyone understood that women in leadership was important. And that probably clearly wasn't true. There was clearly some ruffled waves under the surface. But now it really has become clear that there are some headwinds against women in leadership. And I wonder if, primarily, Sarah, if you could speak to what has changed for women in leadership in the political space, and then for all of you, what do we need to do to make sure that this backsliding does not continue?
Yeah, I was reflecting on this question, and it drew me back to Hillary Clinton's election. Now, just bear with me here. I'm a storyteller. So here I have 4 beautiful nieces, and at the time they were like 6, 7, 8, and 9. And we have a tradition that I would take them to the polling place with me. And I'm talking about the significance of the day. We're going to elect the first woman, and 3 of them were like, yeah. And the littlest one said, no, we're not. This is my mini-me, okay? So she said, no, we're not. And I said, well, Jamise, why do you think that? And I remember her constantly being in front of the TV and seeing some of the nasty rhetoric that at that time candidate Trump was spewing. And she just said, because at my school, oftentimes the bullies win. And it broke my heart. And I said, chin up, trust me, things are gonna go our way. They did not, spoiler, they did not go our way that day. Spoiler. We did not elect the first woman president. And I reflect on that because for many of us women, we are told that we have to get the most education possible, the most training. We can't just go in places and be mediocre. We have to be the best of the best, the top, the most prepared, the most pristine, and also have your hair done, your nails done. You can't have beat up shoes. You have to come in perfect. And even with all of that, many of us struggle with imposter syndrome. We still think that those degrees and certifications and training and all of this lived experience still isn't enough. Mm-hmm. And in this moment in politics, I see so many women who are overly prepared. We have the degrees and certifications and training, and yet the bullies are winning. The perception is that the bullies with one swipe can tear down your education and training, can minimize all the work that you have done and just say, well, you haven't done this, and so all of that doesn't matter. And in politics, we're in a space in which folks just want the receipts. They want to see what exactly have you done. If you haven't gotten it done, I don't care if you're a woman. I'd rather have a man as long as he can be brash and bold and get things done. So there's a crisis point in leadership when it pertains to women, because in Michigan, we've had, a lot of historic firsts. We've seen women in every, part of our government. But we're also seeing this backlash and saying, are you enough? Mm-hmm. And the constant reminder that I give to many of the women in my profession is that you are, and still lead authentically. Because we can't allow the bullies to win, and that is a perception, that's not the reality. And so if we are actually leading in the way that's authentic to us and speaking directly to people and industries, we will find ourselves still in positions of power and authority, but we have to lead differently. And I think that that's a lesson that is really hard to grapple with right now, and we're navigating it literally as I speak. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
You asked what has happened. I think that in part, just politics has happened. And I think that unfortunately set women back decades, unfortunately. But I don't subscribe to the bully notion. I grew up in a household full of boys, so I can roll with the best of them. That's just how I'm wired, how I'm cut. And I think what needs to happen is we need to, again, we put down the mirror, and we need to put the mirror back up and hold the mirror up first and foremost to ourselves, because are we collectively doing enough to advocate for each other? Are we doing enough to support one another? Are we doing enough to pay it forward? And I'd say the answer is no. And I start with myself. I think there's more that I can do and I intend to do to support other women leaders across this industry, because there aren't very many that look like me, much less, have the opportunity to excel in a career like this. And so it will be incumbent upon us in leadership to, again, pay it forward. You have to find that diamond in the rough and also empower them. Imposter syndrome, here's the secret. Here is the secret. It's not just women that suffer from imposter syndrome. Many men suffer from imposter syndrome. They just know how to navigate past it. We internalize it for whatever reason, and we need to break that cycle. We need to, again, rise to the occasion and have a cohort of people to support and also support others that are really trying to figure out what's next. And here's the other piece that I think is truly important. We are missing an entire generation of young women that are lost. They don't know how to navigate what's happening today, let alone what will happen 10 years from now. And so they need to see more examples of women like you see on this stage. And representation matters. Seeing someone in the path that they traveled and knowing that it's possible matters. So I would say, don't look for others to solve the issue. We have to solve it for ourselves. And it starts by what we do in our own communities to lift women up, to lift minorities up, to support things that matter most for people of color and also women. And then what are we doing to continue to support those same individuals along their career?
Wow, I could just say ditto, and I think it could be done here. Listen, I think there's so many issues. First of all, in the nonprofit space, I think there's this assumption that is easier for women because it's one of those fields that people expect women to be leaders in, whether it's the foundation space or the nonprofit space. They think that like it's a kumbaya moment and it's women friendly. I would beg to differ a little bit about that for sure. But I think it's important for us to make sure that we are talking to, as Joy said, young women, right? I see it every day in terms of the women who work with me and work for me. They're not really sure what their path looks like. And they've seen the bullies. They've seen the bullies win. They've seen a change in the workforce and the workplace in ways that they don't understand how that's going to work for them. I'm so encouraged that we're talking about issues like menopause at Mackinac because these are real issues that women deal with. And women, young women who are thinking about having children, how do they navigate that space? It seems crazy that in 2026 we are still talking about having children will that derail your career, but it's a real thing still. And so women are trying to figure that out. And I think it's incumbent upon us to mentor them and help them figure that out. The other thing I think is important, and I'm probably shooting myself in the foot by saying this, is we have to learn sometimes to get out of our own way, get out of their way, right? I think one of the things that happens, and it's happened over time, is that it's hard when you've been the first or the only to sometimes pass that torch along so that other people can move into those spaces. And so I'm really, really challenging myself to know when it's time for me to move aside, to make sure that somebody else is ready to take on the role. At Focus Hope, we have a whole team called the Future Leaders of Hope. And it really was developed when I got there so that we could make sure that we showed young women and men, but how to sit on a board or how to run a nonprofit so that I'm not going to be there forever. And how am I making sure that women in particular, and Black women in particular, know that they can be in those spaces, know that there is room for them in that space, and not for me to think that I have to be the only one that can do this and stay too long at the party. So I think those are some of the things we need to do.
Portia, at Focus Hope, you train Detroiters in fields that often are not majority women-led fields. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you coach. It's an interesting opportunity to literally learn from the coach of how you coach those women to be successful in a predominantly male field.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the most incredible programs we have is the DTE tree trimming program, right? Where women not only get to come to us and see me in the CEO role, and our workforce director is a woman, a Black woman, but then as they're training and they're moving to DTE, they see Joy. So I think that is the first step, right? You see women come in and try to finagle their way into, like, they're interested in it, but they don't know if it's for them, right? So the first thing is the moment they come in our doors, we're saying, any one of these pathways, there are women in that area, and how can we connect them with some of those women so they can see themselves in those roles? The other thing is, again, I think sometimes we have to kind of move the men out of the way. And that's not to tell them that we don't want them to be as successful, because ultimately all of our successes is what's important, right? But sometimes we have to make sure that there's space for them in even our classroom, right? We can't fill it up so quickly that we're not checking to make sure that a woman who might have come to Focus Hope and said, I'm interested in tree trimming, but I'm not sure if I can do it. You know, I don't want to be the one that says to her, well, there's no more room there for you, right? We're going to move you into IT, or we're going to move you into some other area that might seem more friendly to you. And so we've had great success with women who have gone through our tree trimming program and love it. Partnerships with the Great Lakes Water Authority, where, you know, it's not something that a lot of men even want to do, but the women are ready to tackle it because, you know, we don't have a problem getting messy and we don't have a problem tackling the hard things. And so it's just making sure that we're making space and really dialing into what women are interested in. I think there's I think there's a large push sometimes to sort of corral women into certain areas where we think they will be more successful. And we've got to throw that open and say, no, this is not the way to do it. What we've got to do is find out what you're interested in and help you move through that pathway to that.
Would you add anything to that, Joy?
Yeah, I think, Portia hit it on the head, is explaining what's possible, like showing the depth and breadth of opportunity that exists, and then showing them how to prepare, because that's what's missing. These kids don't know how to prepare for the future, and we have to help them. It's not enough to just open the door. You got to open the door, You got to walk them through the threshold. You got to sit them down at the table and have them take their seat at the table. No longer is it enough to just provide the access. You have to help them with their career along the way. And that takes commitment. And that is going to take all of us leaning in and making a commitment to support, in particular, our youth. But every woman across the career spectrum is in need of that same level of support. And I think in doing so, that will enable up-and-coming leaders to excel. And I'm proud, I'm very proud that I have very capable young women leading at DTE. You say, what can we do? This is a powerful bunch of folks in this room at this conference. You all hire people. You all are engaged in philanthropic efforts. You all are engaged in politics. You can advocate for those that are struggling to find their way. You can create those opportunities. This is a powerful, powerful conference. And so everyone has to collectively take up the torch. Take up the torch. Lean into education. Lean into providing access to good paying jobs. Lean into just being present in the room, explaining what it is you do, explaining how you got there. That alone will create a pathway for a young person to follow and for someone who is mid-career to entertain as well. It doesn't have to start with our young people. We have folks in mid-career that are thinking about what's next for me. Show those examples, provide those pathways, and also be willing to support along the way.
Yeah. And Sarah, Senator Anthony, sorry. Listen, I was her intern, so I feel that I get the opportunity to do this. Senator Anthony, you are in politics where you are constantly dealing with people from diverse perspectives, and they do not always share your lived experience, right?
Diverse perspectives.
Diverse perspectives. Crazy. How do you personally navigate when you're up against a situation where someone does not have the same lived experience as you, or the community that you represent?
So it's interesting when you all were speaking, and even in that question, that is additional weight that many women, and particularly women of color, have to come into the room with, right? I often used to come in and I have to disarm, or have my credentials and everything follow me into the room. So I have to prove that I belong to the table first. And even when we're talking about bringing people up and mentoring folks, if you're at the top of your game, if you're a CEO, if you're leading a thing, carving out an additional 5 to 10 hours to mentor and bring folks up, that is additional weight that oftentimes, I've never had a male boss. So I don't know if men who would I've potentially have worked for would have had that same responsibility, or when they see a young man, they're like, I'm gonna pour into that young man. He's gonna be the next Steve. I don't know if that's the case, right?
Who could be the next Steve? I don't know.
Steve, right? Steve looks like he's going somewhere. I'm gonna make sure he comes up. He's not gonna go up the rough side of the mountain. Steve's gonna have a pathway. But that is additional time. It's additional time away from our self-care, away from our families, away from the work. And so I just have to name that is weight that women have to continue to carry. It's also noble work. It's the work that we just have to do if we want to see the complexions of these boardrooms and courtrooms and legislatures change. In terms of the diverse perspectives, I have always been a consensus builder. I've been known to just bop over on the other side of the aisle and then just make up something that we might have in common. I'll go up to the most conservative member and say, Jim, you like air. I see you breathing. I too like air. Can I talk to you about medical debt? Can I interest you in this appropriations conversation, right? Because I've always believed that kindness and storytelling and finding the common ground, right? That's the conference motto or theme, that's really what leads these conversations. And I know that oftentimes when folks see me, they don't see an appropriations chair. They don't see an elected official. They don't see someone who has negotiated billion-dollar deals. They just see a black woman that's in that hot pink suit, and they just maybe are interested in the story that comes behind that. But I do think that despite this current dark time in politics, that is what we need to get back to. is finding that human element, the common ground that roots us. So that's been my role.
What could be more common than all of us have mothers and sisters and daughters and aunts and cousins and people that we love, friends that we love, right? So what could be more common than love for women? I love the chuckles because everyone knows that that's not always the case. Okay, we've touched before on leadership often has sort of the air of an assumption of masculinity, qualities of masculinity. I'm wondering if each of you can talk a little bit more about how have you carved your own path? How have you gotten to be comfortable with traits of leadership that don't necessarily mirror the men that you see in your space?
That don't mirror the men that I see.
The masculine qualities, or perhaps you've assumed some masculine qualities of leadership.
Well, I don't know how to be. I mean, I don't know how to be anyone else because everybody else is taken. So I just don't know how to be anyone else. And I've spent my career, 35 years at a company where, the majority of leaders were. I'm an engineer by training. It is not a profession where you see very many women. I have, it's been my lived experience since I entered into engineering school. So this is not foreign to me to be in a room that is full of men and I'm the only woman or I'm the only person of color. It just isn't. And so I had to become comfortable with being uncomfortable and, know my worth and be able to, and I have to credit Mary Barra was saying this because she and I have had conversations about this. It's just having a perspective and being able to offer my perspective and not being shy about offering my perspective. And I had to grow into that, of course, but I don't think that's any different for men or women. I think that over time, as you build technical acumen, as you build domain knowledge, you become more comfortable to represent your thoughts and ideas, and that is how you are noticed. I had a friend that told me long ago, when you walk into a room, you're going to be noticed. You're a female engineer, you're going to be noticed. Make sure that they remember you for the right reasons, that you have a perspective, that you represent yourself and what you know in those rooms. And here's the other piece that isn't often talked about. You need sponsors and mentors. You also need sponsors. You can be a sponsor, certainly, but you need mentors, and there is a difference. A mentor is somebody who's going to give you counsel, advice. They may or may not have seen your work, but that's valuable insights that you can gain. A sponsor is the one who's going to speak to your credibility. It's going to speak to what you're capable of in rooms that you are not in. Yep. And that's the person that you need to cultivate a relationship with. They know you. They know what you're capable of. They know, they've seen your work, and they can speak credibly about what you're capable of. So they provide that access. You need both. And so I would say, for me, I have not, saw a particular man or a woman that I wanted to emulate. It's just who I am. But that's just my unique experience. And I will say it's a bit different because I literally grew up in the company that I work for. I started and shadowed engineers when I was 15 years old. 15 years old, a young, impressionable 15-year-old engaging with young engineers and older engineers at the time. If you want to know what can make a difference, that makes a difference. Yeah. We need to create those types of experiences for young people so they understand and they can get comfortable with who they are and who they want to be. Mm-hmm.
So, as you mentioned, Laura, I've had a myriad of careers and a myriad of different jobs in different spaces, but I started out practicing law. I'm a lawyer, and I will tell you all a story. When I first started, I first started practicing as basically a criminal defense lawyer, and I moved over to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, and I was trying a case, and a young man who had committed a carjacking, he was 17 years old, his family was in the courtroom, and he was going to prison, and I was advocating for him to go to prison because that's what the time and the crime deserved, right? And at one point, I realized that this young man had no idea how much the world was going to change during the course of the time he was out. At 17, none of us can imagine 17 years later, right? We can't, or 20 years later. It just seems so far away. And I never will forget the judge looked over at me and said, "Madam Prosecutor, are you crying?" And I was visibly tears rolling down my eyes. And, of course, I said, "No, Your Honor, I'll be fine. I'm fine. I'm fine." And I was, and I knew that I was doing the right thing. It wasn't a conflict about what was happening, right? This was part of my job. And like I said, I knew that this was, a deserved amount of time in prison. But I think initially my tendency was to try to toughen up in a way that I would never, ever have those kind of moments again. And listen, I'm the person that cries at a commercial. I may cry at the bar. Who knows? Anything could happen. But I wanted to try to toughen up so that would never happen again. As I moved to different roles, as I moved, when I worked for the Attorney General under President Obama, I'd be in these rooms and, I'm going to be tough. And then I think as I moved through my career and I got a little older and a little wiser, I realized that that's who I am. And I was just going to lean into it. So, there have been moments at Focus Hope where it's been tough, right? And I will get teary. I will, be like, okay, we got to do this. Or we have to do something difficult that I don't want to do. Earlier this year, actually last year now, we lost our Head Start funding. I had to lay off like 100 people overnight. And it was the hardest thing I've done, right? I mean, these are families who entrust us with their children every day, who we are trying to provide them a start so that they can compete in this global economy that they're going to grow up into. And we know other countries are doing that. And it was tough. And I remember when the Free Press wrote the story, they said that I choked up when I was saying it. And, for a moment,
you're human.
Right. For a moment, I thought, all that I said, and they remembered that I choked up. But then I was like, you know what? That's who I am, right? And so at this point in my career and this point in my life, I don't try to be anything else. Like, it's just who I am. It's the fullness of who I am. And I hope in some ways that the women and the men who watch me every day and who were there either in that courtroom or in that press conference understood why. And I think we owe it to them and we owe it to ourselves to bring our full human experience into these jobs, right? We are not robots. And we don't go we don't go through this robotically, and we don't want them to feel like to emulate or to be in these positions, they have to emulate anybody other than who they are and to bring them their full selves to the table. So that's what I do.
So when you come into our office in the Capitol, it's on the 3rd floor, stop by anytime. You've been there, folks have been there. You walk in and there's the photo, they're black and white photos of every single appropriations chair who has ever done it. And then there's me. So they're all white men, and I'm friends with several of them, the living ones at least. And, and then there's me. And one day, we were in early and we were looking at them, and my mom was there and she said, "You know what they all have in common?" And I'm like, "Mom." And she said, "Oh no, they all have wives. They have support at home," because they have a little bio underneath it. It's like, "Oh yeah, Dave is married to Sarah." And I realized that a few things. One is me being not only female, but also not being married, not having children, that there would be a different demand on my time. That folks think that if you don't have those responsibilities at home, that you can instantly fill it with work and community and other things. And I had to early on define what I wanted to bring into that role. I had to make sure that I saw this not as a part of who I am, but as a job that will end, a job that I will run as hard as I possibly can and then hand off the baton to someone. Hopefully so that there's not just all dudes and then my photo, but that there's another woman that I can hand it off to. And I also had to realize that the culture of the legislature is a predominantly male one. And so late nights and drinking and cigars and the deal making on the golf course, I don't like to do a lot of that. I like to do manicures. I like brunch. I like the gun range. Very feminine things. And so I just had to realize that given the position and the power that it brings, that the systems will bend to me. And if I set my own standards and my own boundaries in this role, they will come to me, even if it means we go get hands and toes done as we talk shop. And I think that the thing that I've committed to doing in this job, not just as appropriations chair, but just throughout my time in the legislature, is bring my entire self. I felt like it would be a betrayal if I brought on everybody else's stuff and then left my own lived experience. If I didn't bring my femaleness, if I didn't bring a middle class background, the fact that I'm from Lansing, which is, in mid-Michigan, it's a predominantly white community. And I didn't know that they would rock with me when I said, I want to introduce the Crown Act, right? But that was a part of my lived experience. And so ultimately, I think that the way I've tried to approach this position is just bringing my entire self, which is kind of cliche, right. But at the same time, when you do it, people notice. And I think people notice even when we've been crafting these states' budgets, we see more investments for women and for children and marginalized communities. We've shown that you can do the state budget even very differently. And by having someone at the table, we talk about having a seat at the table. I often say, well, what are you gonna do with that? Because we have many women in positions of power that don't speak up, that don't show that you can check multiple boxes. They don't lead with their entire selves. And I'd much rather have a courageous man than a weak woman at a table. I really would. So that's what I do. That's what I do. Yeah.
Do you want to add, Joy?
Yeah, well, the only thing I'll add, I'm a mother of 3 children. I love my children to death. My team they get to hear about, I love to cook. How many people I cook for Christmas? There you go, 60 people at Christmas time. I mean, it's just my lived experience. I don't have to be someone else at work. It's just, I am who I am. And if I can't be my full self at work, then I need to find a new job. Because that is, I can't be anyone else. And so I have been blessed to work for a company that values one's whole self and allows for us to bring our whole self to work. And I may be unique, but I'm in a position where I can continue that legacy and encourage people to do the same. And so I hope that through these types of conversations, those that may be feeling like, they're in the wrong spot, that you feel empowered to change the course. We love to have you at DTE. We need more.
This whole thing is just a recruiting event, really. Yeah.
I may not come to DTE, but I'm trying to get an invitation to that Christmas dinner. Because I don't cook, so there's that. So.
And I need you to run for office.
Politics, I don't think so.
So one of the things that we talk a lot about at this particular moment is the idea of switching from a scarcity mindset to one of abundance. And it feels like right now in particular, there's a lot of funding constraints and quotas and things, right, like sort of numbers that kind of force you into this mindset of scarcity. And I wonder if you all could answer, how do you personally keep yourself in a mindset of abundance to not only help yourself think about the future, but also to bring others along with you?
How do I think about that? One, I'm strong in my faith, first and foremost, that I pray a lot. I pray daily. And the things that I pray for is to have discernment, to know how to navigate the challenges that I may face. But I also pray for my children, for their children. Hopefully, I'm waiting on those grandchildren, by the way. And I find myself that if I don't spend time just appreciating where I am, gratitude is so powerful. Giving thanks for where one is in any given moment, because not one of us in this room is promised tomorrow.
Right.
And you all know that.
Yep.
So I stay solidly in my faith, and I am been blessed in abundance when it comes to love that I have for my family and that my family has for me. And that's first and foremost, and that will carry me through without a question. When it comes to work, I have been extraordinarily blessed to have a really great team, but that didn't happen by accident. That was, a culture that was cultivated over years and years and years and still continues to evolve. And when you assume these powerful roles in organizations like mine and Focus Hope, when you take on politics in the way that my friend over here has, you have that responsibility to shape the culture. to shape the culture where gratitude first and foremost is something that your team embraces, that we say thank you to one another, that we're kind to one another, that we're respectful for one another, that we acknowledge the hard work that people do, but we also stretch them to be better than where they are today, because so many people are relying on us, whether you know it or not. In the role that you're in, they're relying on you. Someone is relying on you. And you need to bring your best self to work. So if you don't create that environment where people feel like they can feel like they're appreciated, that there's gratitude, that there is a way for us to navigate and have each other's back along the way, then there is no hope for success for that organization or for this country. And I think if we start to flip the script a bit and focus more on gratitude, the ideation that will happen, stand back and watch people bring their best selves, their best ideas that will benefit us all. That's what, the rules that I follow, how I live my life each day.
Love that.
I think the gratitude piece is huge. I mean, waking up every day, it's interesting, as I talked about Head Start, when it first happened, and even today up here now, people will say to me, "Hey, Portia, how's it going? How are you doing at Focus Hope?" And, I think they're always a little surprised because I'm like, we're good. Things are okay. We were very lucky. The state came right in and said, here's some additional dollars. Let's do some Great Start Readiness Program, which is one of our state-funded classrooms. So we were able to bring some children back. We were able to bring some teachers back. And I think it was because I was never going to let it be the thing that, took me under, right, or took us under. It was like, we're grateful. We're still here. And I think also, one, it would be a disservice to the 45,000 seniors we feed every month, to the 350 young people who end up in employment and in careers, to our families who bring and trust their children with us. But I also think it would be a disservice to Eleanor Jositis and Father William Cunningham, our founders. I mean, if you don't know the story of Focus Hope, we're 58 years old. We're still on Oakland Boulevard, where we were when we started, rather. And I said Oakland, Oakmen. But Eleanor was a suburban housewife who lived in Taylor, who partnered up with Father William Cunningham, obviously a priest, a Catholic priest, after the 1967 rebellion that happened in our neighborhood, right? And they basically said, the only way we can sort of bring the neighborhood back and recreate what had been and maybe grow something that hasn't happened yet is to start Focus Hope. So, there are going to be tough times, but I think it's that gratitude that we're going to get through it, and saying thank you, and just saying thank you for waking me up. Because as Joy said, no day is promised. We all kind of, and I think it's important. I told a team member yesterday, I got a text, and she said, I really need a day. And she's in the middle of caregiving, and she's that sandwich generation where she's caregiving for a parent. She also has children. And I said, I'm going to Mackinac. You stay at home this week and get some rest. Because at the end of the day, and this is not to say it in a harsh way, I said it to someone last night, it will be there. The work will be there. Mm-hmm. The work is not going anywhere. I mean, one of the things that I learned, my dad was a judge, and he got his appointment from Governor Milliken. A judge had died in a plane crash. And, it took a month or so for him to get the appointment. And when he got it, he went down to what used to be called Frank Murphy Hall of Justice. They've now moved a little bit farther up the street. But he said when he got there, there's a door and a vestibule and a door. And the court had put the judge who had passed, they had put his items, his personal items, in a box. And it was sitting in the vestibule. And he said, it was the best reminder he could have starting his judicial career. He said, because they weren't being disrespectful, but it was for him a reminder that the work was going to continue whether he was there or not, right? Mm. And so I think it's important to realize that, to not think you're more important than the work. I always remind my staff, if something happens to me, Focus Hope, after 58 years, is not going to close because Portia Roberson is not there to run it, right? Mm-hmm. And so being grateful for the opportunity to run it, being grateful for the ideas that come from a great team, and wanting for it to continue another 58 years is all part of what I'm grateful for. But also the reminder to people to take care of themselves and to also be grateful and to also pray, because it is sort of the thing that we need to let people know, particularly young people who are now, I think now are really challenged around what does work look like, whether it's in the office, out of the office. You know, I think one thing they've gotten right is to remind some of us who are a little bit more seasoned that their mental health, their self-care is important as well. And so I've embraced a little of that from them, but I do think it's about realizing that it's going to be tough. We're going to take our time. We're going to figure out ways to get through it. And in the meantime, we're going to take care of ourselves.
Thank you. Senator Anthony, anything you want to add?
I surround myself with people that remind me to like take the 50,000-foot view of things. So my chief of staff is here, Christy James, just wave, hey, KJ. So she does this for us in the office, right? So a good example is when like social media and like you read the comments, and you should never read the comments, right? So you get really in the woods and all of that. A third of these people don't exist, they're robots. A third of these people would never say it to my face, admire. And then a third of these people have a genuine gripe, and we can have a civil conversation, but I'm not gonna change their minds there. Or Christy will remind me, we'll stop as soon as one of our bills gets passed, and she'll say, no, stop for a minute. Think about what we just accomplished.
Yeah.
You just got as far as anyone has ever gotten on wage discrimination, which impacts women disproportionately than men. Or, hey, did you just know that we just passed an $80+ billion budget and your fingerprints are all over it? And to be able to have people that surround you, even in our personal lives, to say, I know that you're not making what you need to. I know you got passed over for that position. I know that your house could be bigger, or your waistline could be smaller, or whatever. But you're alive, you're healthy, you have a home, you have food on the table, you got a little bit of savings, you are employed, and you are upwardly mobile. Folks around us, sometimes that's family members, sometimes that's coworkers, it's friends, but surrounding myself with people like that helped me live in abundance in a way that has just been very healthy for me, both physically and mentally.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, we now have an awesome opportunity to ask these wonderful women questions. So if anyone has a question that you would like to ask Joy, Portia, or Senator Anthony, please let us know. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Coming around.
We've got a mic coming towards you.
Couple of ground rules. If I trip over your bag, you owe me an ice cream, and I'll hold the microphone if you have questions, myself or Megan, who's on the other side of the room.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Dewey from General Motors, and I think we can all agree that women engage in so much invisible labor, definitely in the home, but also in the office. Taking the meeting minutes, planning the events, all of those things. How do we better acknowledge and celebrate that work and sort of rebrand it as leadership?
How do we go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, one thing I think women have to learn to do, hi neighbor, I didn't say hi, is to say no to something. Some things that we are asked to do are not in our purview anymore. There's somebody else to do that. So I think one of the things you're constantly learning as a woman, even in leadership, is to be able to say no. Because I too, people will assume I'm going to do certain things, and I'm like, wait, I'm not taking the notes anymore. I'm not doing that anymore. But I also think that there is value in learning from all of that work, because I want to be very clear. There was a time when I took all the notes, right? So I think as your career progresses, there's the ability to say no. But in the beginning, I think we have to make sure young women understand that that's how we all started. And I think sometimes the vision is that you just ended up here. You graduated from college, you maybe got a law degree, got an engineering degree, and then all of a sudden, you were running DTE. It just, no. She's just the boss. Right. There's a lot of grunt work that gets you here. And I think I just made the mistake of calling it grunt work, right? And so I think even if you're having to do that, there is value in that, because there is a learning experience in that. And I think you're right, we do have to do a better job of showing young women and men that it's important to make sure that they do that work, because that's going to prepare them for what is coming next. And oftentimes, if you skip those steps, even if you get that promotion, you really don't know what you're doing with it because you haven't done those basic steps to get there. That's where you learn the most. When I had to write briefs for other lawyers, that's where I learned how to practice law, right? It wasn't because somebody said, hey, go in there and try that case right away. No, it was because I had to write all the stuff and it would come back and I had to change it over and I had to do the research and to look up stuff. But that's where I learned to do the work that I ultimately ended up doing. So that's my thought.
Great.
I won't. Oh, hello, I won't, don't worry. Hi, everybody. My name is Jasmine Barnett. I'm Director of Development for Force Detroit. I have a question. I first came here as a staffer, and now I'm here as a Director of Development. And one of the things that I was mentioning to someone before, as we move up in leadership and we try to go back and we pull people forward, how do we connect with other leaders? One of the things I've noticed as I've moved up in my career, people are used to me being in not a servant position, because I call myself a servant leader, but as a staffer, people are used to me being in a very different position. And now that I lead this position as a director and I'm trying to make sure I introduce people and I bring my staff up, how as leaders do we connect? Because I often feel I go up to someone who knew me from a previous role and they only know me as, oh, that's the girl who used to print the paper. And now I'm in this leadership role. I'm finding a disconnect with the people who used to say, I'm your mentor, to now I'm in this leadership role and they don't know how to connect with me and I don't know how to connect with them. But we all are trying to do the same thing, and I'm looking for guidance. Even being here, how do we actually say that we're gonna do what we say we're gonna do? Because I've grown through my career and I've made it to where I said I wanted to be, but I also find it scary now that I'm in this position and I don't know how to reach out to those people that I used to print their papers out for.
You exchange business cards, and yours says director.
You hold up your tag that you're wearing, right?
Yours says director now, and you're no longer that staff person. But I mean that in all seriousness, that you can acknowledge your journey. Like, yes, I used to be, yes, that was my role maybe 10 years ago. And now I have some staff people that you should, meet that are currently responsible for that. But you quickly pivot to what is your priority today in your current capacity, and how do we partner on some of the things that are important. But I say that routinely, and I don't think that I haven't had to exchange my business cards with a few people, because it no longer says Joy Harris Director. It says Joy Harris CEO. Woo.
Joy starts out by saying, allow me to reintroduce myself.
It often just takes one uncomfortable conversation to get it back on track, reset expectations. Did you have a question?
Yes, Kim Johnson from Developing Kids. And my question is, what is your strategy to, as you are in your positions now, to mentor and keep that balance when you have multiple people who want your time as a mentor?
I'll say this publicly, and I'll get my team will kill me for doing this, but I yet to say no to anybody who has approached me to be a mentor. It's just been a matter of how much time I can allocate, and I'll be really upfront. I was like, I can only meet with you maybe once a year. But here's what I often tell people, because there is a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And so if I don't interact with you regularly, the only thing I can respond to is what you tell me. And so I can give you, insights about my experience, but that's mine. That's uniquely mine. I don't have context. Where you are is somewhere where I'm not. And so I can't see you in these situations. So I can share with you what my path has been, but that might not be the path for you. I mean, honestly, I get people that will come to my office, they will schedule time. I'll say, okay, I'll meet you and we can have this mentorship conversation. We sit down, I say, what do you want to talk about? And they're like, well, I don't know. I was like, I don't know either. This is going to be, I was like, you need to really think about why you want that mentoring relationship. What are you looking to gain? What insights are you looking to gain? And that's the first conversation that I'll have. And at some point, I'll say, then I'm probably not the person that should serve as your mentor. I can probably point you to the person that can. And so that's how I kind of, parse out my time, because I can't meet with everyone, but I can be cordial, I can have a conversation with you, I can share with you what my experience has been, but really, You need mentors, but you need sponsors. You need sponsors that see your work, that know what you're capable of, and that can give you really crisp insights on what you're doing right, what you may need to do differently, and what path might be the ideal path based on your background.
Mentoring is like my secret weapon, right? And by mentoring, I mean me being mentored. It is the reason why after 20 years in politics, I haven't had many big gaffes. I haven't run for things that I know I wouldn't win. I haven't had nasty headlines about scandals and all of that. I have leaned on the wisdom of people from all walks of life, all races, all professions to help guide and steer me. And I also recognized early that I was mentorable. So I would never come into your office and say, what do you want to talk about? For me,
You would be surprised.
that's insane. I would come in and say, here's the 3 things that I want to learn from you, and when can we set up our next conversation? Here's the milestones that I want to achieve in the next 5 years. What are some things that I could do? And that's what I look for when I am mentoring individuals, right? Because it's lots of folks who will say, oh yeah, I want to be where you are. And I will often say, well, show me what you're already doing towards that path, and I can give you a boost. But I don't have the time or capacity to just make it up along the way. And I think that that's almost disrespectful of the time and energy that would take from folks who are carrying a lot. And so, and often it's very organic. Whether it's people that are on my team, other lawmakers, women who come into the legislature. I have a no rough side of the mountain policy, which is if I've already gone through it, I need to share. That is my responsibility. Because it is just very difficult to be a policymaker at the state level. You're fundraising, you're doing research, you're managing staff, you're managing community politics, and you're always thinking about your next re-election. And so all of that happening at one time and in an age of term limits, we should all be responsible for sharing what we know. And so with women coming into the legislature, I also try to serve as a mentor because, at some point I won't be in elected office anymore, but I feel like that's another part of my responsibility is leading and also mentoring.
Well, I want to thank you all for being part of this wonderful conversation. If there's one thing you could leave our audience with,
one more.
We have one more question. We have time for one more question. Thank you.
Sorry, Tanya Hill, just a comment to the young lady. Fabulous panelists, you are setting trailblazers for all of us. But the young lady, I want to tell you, you do not have to spend time with them for them to mentor you. Obama's my mentor. Oprah is my mentor. I read about them, I study them, I watch them. These women are all public figures. Read them, study them, and watch them, and they will continually be your mentors always. And thank you all for everything you do.
Thank you.
Well, that was a beautiful way to wrap up our panel. If there's one thing you could leave our audience with, what's a quick call to action or one message you wanna end with here?
Well, thank you again. I have home training, so thank you. If I had one thing I would say is that even in very dark times and very challenging times, don't let anything steal your joy. It's just not worth it.
Yep. Yeah. Bingo. That is on my bingo card, by the way. Yes. The other thing is never stop learning. I have committed myself to be a learner, and I'm still learning each and every day. I'm learning more about myself. I'm learning more about what it means to be at this level of leadership. I'm not, afraid to say that. I'm very, vulnerable in communicating that it is a learned experience. One does not know until you arrive in this stratosphere. And so never stop learning, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask for help.
Well, the challenge when you go last is, and you're sitting with fabulous people, you got to come up with something new. And I don't really have anything new other than have fun. I mean, again, don't take any of this too serious. I mean, it is work and it is hard and there are difficult days. But, again, this is a tough time. It's certainly a tough time for all of us. And we all may have differing views on stuff, but I think there is such common ground amongst us, and there are ways in which to enjoy that. I often get asked when I'm on panels with people who may feel a little differently than me. How do you get along with them? And I'm like, you know what? There are things that we enjoy the same things. And so, I think you have to find that with other people. I think you have to sit down and have conversations with people. I really think it's still important to take some time to talk to people and to listen. That's one of the things I'm still learning myself, is sometimes you can be talking and you're not listening as much as you should be. And so I'm working on that as well. And I think you're always working and growing and learning how to do this work.
Well, thank you all so much. I learn from all of you every day, and I so appreciate your time. We all do. Thank you.